Greetings, this is Griff Ruby with part 72 of my series, Ecclesiology for Sedevacantists, based on Dogmatic Theology, Volume 2, Christ Church, by Msgr G. Van Noort. Continuing, page 203, Scholium, on temporal prosperity. In discussing the mark of holiness, strange as it may seem, non-Catholics often introduce the subject of the influence of the true religion in promoting prosperity, and the alleged superiority of Protestant nations in this regard. In so complex a question, since this is not a dissertation on economics, one can only indicate a few points which may help save confusion. It is one thing to inquire about genuine happiness in this life, and quite another matter to inquire about temporal prosperity in the sense of an abundance of material comforts. The real source of earthly happiness does not depend either uniquely or principally on material goods or secular culture. It depends much more on the soul's moral dispositions, on what is currently termed peace of mind. America, for example, which is the world's wealthiest nation, has seen in the past 10 years a perfect rash of bestsellers, now more like in the past 50 years or more, a perfect rash of bestsellers designed to help unhappy people find such interior peace. Many people who struggle hard for their daily bread and who are not possessed of much secular culture frequently seem to lead happier lives than others who are quite wealthy and highly cultured. We do not deny in the least that worldly goods, both of body and mind, can contribute to happiness in this life, but we do maintain that nothing contributes so much to this life's happiness as does the following of the true religion and the serious pursuit of and progress in moral goodness. Happiness and real holiness go hand in hand, so much so that it has become a truism. A saint who is sad makes a sad sort of saint. That is why there is no doubt that all the Catholic men who strive to live up to the rules of their religion, all else being equal, even in this life, enjoy far greater happiness than other men. This is true not only of individuals, but of nations. But please note the restrictive clause, all else being equal. 2. Temporal prosperity, considered strictly as such, i.e., as distinct from morality, may be summed up in the following points: a plentiful supply of material goods, intellectual cultivation of native talents, political peace, and political power. Now, these things, even though they can receive an indirect stimulus from religion, do not directly or necessarily depend upon religion. They depend on other and purely natural causes, causes which are quite varied and complex. Thus, it is ridiculous to try to use such things as criteria for solving questions about the truth or holiness of any religion, passing over the question of purely material goods. The arts and sciences flourished widely in ancient Greece. The Roman people, during the era of the emperors, enjoyed complete domination of the entire known world. May we then conclude that the ancient Greek or Roman religions were so excellent? On the other side of the ledger, during the Old Testament times, the Jews alone worshipped the true God. Yet at the same time, they were far below the Egyptians and the Babylonians by standards of wealth, secular culture, and political power. Christ himself was poor. He worked as a carpenter and lived in a backward village. Shall we conclude that therefore his religion is untrue? If someone raises the question of the indirect influence on temporal affairs, as contrasted to Catholicism and Protestantism, one might fairly concede that Protestantism, by the very fact that it does less to focus attention on heavenly things, does perhaps favor the production of material wealth more than Catholicism. But there is no doubt at all that Catholicism, by its teachings on the necessity of good works, does more to foster the equitable distribution of material goods, which means according to justice, and he mentions here of social justice. The Catholic social justice is you get what you earn and not what the state gives you or doesn't give you or whatever. Again, one might concede that Protestantism is, by its principle of private judgment, this is even true of rationalism, does perhaps give more stimulus to investigations in the field of the physical sciences. Okay, on this point, footnote. Never mind. At the same time, however, that very same principle has produced the giddiest sort of errors in some sciences, particularly the philosophical. Catholicism is definitely more favorable to the development of the arts. Catholicism, by its very nature, strikingly promotes political tranquility, i.e., in principle. The fact that some so-called Catholic nations have been split into multitudinous factions in recent times stems not from Catholicism, but from principles which are diametrically opposed to the principles of the Catholic religion, namely rationalism and a spirit of rebellion. Rationalism and a spirit of rebellion were the genuine offspring of early Protestantism, and it is precisely these principles which agitate political matters in the very nations alluded to. And how much more, when so much went to the Novus Ordo, there's so much more rationalism and rebellion, so much more. You see, and what are we seeing in the world? Everything's disintegrating. Whole nations are just falling apart. And not just a few here and there this time, but now a whole bunch. As a matter of fact, few would maintain that modern France, Italy, Spain, and so forth are Catholic insofar as they are political units. Certainly during the early years of the 20th century, it was quite clear that the governments and ruling classes of those nations were not animated by Catholic principles. In more recent days, the advent of men like Adenauer or de Gasperi has witnessed the attempt to infiltrate the political arena with Christian rather than rationalist principles. Well, as for political superiority, the modern world has tasted bitterly the fact that it is often not the result of moral goodness, but of military might and injustice. Can anyone forget Hitler's Germany, Stalin's Russia, Chow En-lai's Red China, or the other Red China of Chairman Mao, or Pol Pot, Cambodia? For these and other reasons, which this is definitely not the place to discuss in detail, the temporal superiority of some Protestant nations, when it is genuinely present, should not be attributed to Protestantism as such, but to altogether different factors, just as the collapse of some Catholic nations is due not to their religion, but either to their abandoning Catholic principles or to various causes in the purely natural order. Finally, the tremendous good various nations, and particularly European nations, owe to the influence of the Catholic Church is a fact that educated Protestants do admit. So, I think he said it all right there. I don't need to add.